Hello and welcome to the Grow From podcast. Today we have an extra special guest, Jackie Coley, the Get Unstuck Coach, who's going to be talking to us today about how people can use the mindset to make a positive career change. So Jackie has been a researcher, a toxicologist, a cell biologist. She's been a project manager, a writer, and she's been part of a Japanese exchange program. For the last 3 years, Jackie has been focusing her efforts on helping high-performing individuals step out of their existing careers into something they're really passionate about and they really love. And so today, what we're going to talk about is just that, how you can take something that maybe you're really good at today and maybe is making you a lot of money today, but maybe isn't very fulfilling, and step into something that you love. And Jackie, I remember connecting with you. I remember not too long ago on LinkedIn, I saw a career coach, a career advisor. I'm not sure what he was, but he said, look, when you're ready to make that career change, when you know what you want to do and you're ready, I'm here for you. But until you get there, there's a place for Jackie, for the Get Unstuck Coach, to step in and help you uncover what it is that's going to make you feel truly fulfilled. So I'm excited to unpack that with you today. And thank you for being on our podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kevin. It's an honor to be here.
So unpack for us, what is the difference between what it is you're doing? Like, just lay it out at the beginning. What is the difference between what you're doing and what career coaches do?
Thank you for asking that. That's a really important distinction. So a typical career coach, a traditional career coach, I should say, will help you with things that have to do a lot of times with the logistics of the job transition or job search. So like how to optimize your resume, how to network effectively, how to interview well, things of that nature. You know, the things that we all know we need to do in order to land any job. Doesn't matter what the job is. What I do is something that's a little bit deeper than that, because what I know from my own experience and from working with others is that it doesn't matter how perfect your resume is. It doesn't matter if you've practiced all of your interview skills, if you've had, you know, the networking scripts to reach out to people. It doesn't matter if you're doing all of those things if your mindset isn't in the right place. You know, if on some level you don't think that you're qualified for the thing that you want, if you're worried that people are going to judge you for reaching out to them, you know, if you're afraid that you're going to come across as awkward because you're nervous about interviewing, like if those sorts of thoughts are running the show, all of the things that you're doing on the surface are going to be affected by that, and typically in a negative way. And so what I do is help refine the mindset that's running the show, right? So that you can show up in a way that's powerful and it's more aligned with the kind of person that you want to be, so that you can ultimately create a career for yourself that is fulfilling and allows you to do the kind of meaningful work that you want to do.
Now, one of the things that just strikes me as you're bringing that up is on LinkedIn, and I suppose the majority of your clients are high success individuals. These are people who have MBAs, PhDs already, right?
Yes.
And so it's surprising to me, and maybe to the audience, that these individuals don't have that mindset, that there's something there that's blocking them. So how does somebody become so successful and wrestle with this?
One of the ways that this happens that's pretty common is that oftentimes when we're growing up, we have this story about what our life is supposed to look like, right? Like, you know, you go to school, you get into a good college, you get good grades, maybe you go on to higher ed. And then at some point you enter the workforce and you do the career thing and then you get to retire. Like that's the story that most of us were raised with. And so, you know, we've been following that path, and I'm one of those, right? Like that was my story too. And what happens is that if you're someone, again, like me, or like the high achievers that I work with, if you've been the dutiful student most of your life, you're used to following the rules. You're used to doing what's expected of you and getting rewarded for playing nice in the system. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. However, the reason a lot of people get stuck in what looks like a really successful career, if you're on the outside looking in, is that what they've been doing this whole time is following what they're good at. You know, they're chasing after achievements, you know, often for the sake of achievement, because when you get rewarded for doing these things, you tend to want to do more of that because we like rewards, right? Like it feels good. And no one's ever stopped and told them that it's okay to ask yourself, what do you actually want? Just because I'm good at this thing doesn't mean I'm going to enjoy it.
Yes.
But if you've never been given permission or been told that it's okay to consider something else, even if it's not what's expected of you, then why would you ever think to do that, right? Until you get to a point where you're not in the system anymore. There's not a curriculum that's kind of pushing you through, which is what happens when you've been in school for so long, right? When you're out
Hmm.
in the real world as an adult, there is no curriculum. There is no path that's laid out so cleanly for you. So if you continue doing what you've been doing and following what you're good at and what you're trained in and what you're skilled at, you may find yourself in a role where you are technically proficient, right? You're good at what you're doing, you're highly competent, and you may even be making decent money, but somewhere deep down, it doesn't fit right for you. It doesn't feel like the thing that you want to be doing or that you're meant to be doing. There's some sort of disconnect between the things that you're doing in your job and what you feel like would make you feel more satisfied. And so
So these people can be completely technically competent and have achieved these high levels of success through their technical prowess, so to speak, but haven't really figured out what it is that's driving them, how to step into something that they're passionate about. So you talked a little bit about it doesn't feel right, but what are some signs that people have? Like if somebody's in a career right now and they're not feeling fulfilled, what are some signs that they should be looking for that say, I need to change, I need to step out of this and try something new?
Some of the signs can be things like you're phoning it in, that it's become so routine that it's just something you show up and do every day, and you're doing it on autopilot. And what that can look like over time is that you blink and you're like, oh my God, where'd the last 5 years go?
Mm.
Right? And you're pretty much on this conveyor belt where you're moving forward, but you don't really have any control over it. Your life feels like it's on rails, and time is just passing by. And it's just the same thing day in and day out, and you don't really feel any fulfillment about it. That can also show up as that you are doing things to cope and distract because on some level you were stressed out and unhappy. And when we're not aware of that it's just something we're just kind of living with and we're accustomed to it, we find ways to mitigate that pain. And that can look like, numbing behavior. You could maybe be drinking a little bit more than is reasonable, right? You're using that as an excuse to kind of check out or maybe even just complain about work. I used to do that. That was one of the things that I noticed that was a really scary behavior. Once I realized I was doing it, after work, I would be at the wine bar with my friends, complaining about work like you do. But it
Hmm.
was happening to the detriment of my health, right? Like I also wasn't taking care of my health. I wasn't working out. That's another thing that can show up, that you're not as present in your personal life because you don't feel fulfilled elsewhere. And that's not something that we can compartmentalize. It touches everything. So if you are deeply unhappy at work, it's going to show up elsewhere in your life as well. And it's going to lead to dissatisfaction in other areas. So this is one of those things that it's not as overt as if you're in a toxic situation, right? Like that this is
Right.
a bad fit for you and you have to get the hell out. In a lot of cases, it's not like that. It's more of a kind of that little voice on your shoulder that's like, this isn't right for you, and it just won't go away.
Mm.
And so
I
you do
think of
whatever you
like
can to numb it.
it reminds me of the boiled frog story, right? You put the frog in the water and the pan boils up and the frog doesn't notice until it's too late, just because they get so used to a bad environment or a bad situation. It just becomes normal for them. Not a toxic one, like you said, obviously if it's boiling it right away, you're out. But if over time you're unhappy, you kind of just acclimate to being unhappy sometimes. I remember some of my jobs, I've seen coworkers that are just very, very bitter, and it brings down the whole workplace. So, that's an interesting point. When people come to you, how do they know to come to you? So, like, there's people who are actively looking for a new career, right? And they know, okay, I'm looking for a new career. Here's the resources I need to get with to find that career. But how do they know that they need to take a step before that? Like, what is that driving factor that says, okay, I'm not quite ready to do a job interview. I need to contact Jackie before that because I know there's something not right. how do they know it's not right, but not know they're ready to? Does that make sense? Like, how do they find you in that sense?
Yeah. So a lot of the people that find me tend to fall into a couple of different groups. They're either thinking about doing something different, like they know that they want to make some kind of a change, but can't necessarily put their finger on what that change might look like. They just know that that the situation they're currently in isn't the right one for them. And so they're kind of searching, right? They're searching for the answer. Some people are looking for something in particular, like they have an idea about what they want to do, and maybe they're browsing job postings and kind of looking around and looking for opportunities a bit more actively because they have some idea of what they want. And then there are a handful who are in the planning stages but can't seem to pull the trigger and take the first step. So those are kind of the three buckets that people fall into, who tend to find their way into my world. And oftentimes the thing that catches their attention is the language about being stuck, that the way that they're stuck might be slightly different, but they still feel stuck in some way. And they resonate with the idea of, I know I want to do this thing, but I can't seem to make myself do it. Or I really want to get out of my job, but I just keep talking myself out of even going after opportunities because I'm telling myself a story that I'm not going to get it. They self-select out and don't ever make the attempt in the first place.
And what are some of those? What are some of those stories? Like, if they're self-selecting themselves out and they have a story in their mind, like, is it just they don't think they'll make as much money in a different job? Is it they don't feel they're qualified? Like, what are some of those barriers that they're experiencing?
A lot of those stories come down to either this is all I know how to do, like especially for those who are looking to pivot into a completely different field. Changing jobs within your field is one thing, but if you're really just not on the right path and you're looking to make a directional change, the big story that tends to crop up is, but this is all I know how to do. This is all I'm qualified to do. And that is typically not as true as it feels in the moment. The other story that's a little bit more widespread and more common for the people in the various situations is, what are people going to think if I walk away from this? Like, this looks like a successful job. What's wrong with me that I can't make it work? And what are people going to think if I decide that I want to, quit my corporate job and open a coffee shop or do something completely different? They're worried about the judgment that's going to come.
Like a prestige issue?
Not necessarily a prestige issue. I think it's an identity issue. That you're so used to being associated, and this is true for a lot of us who have survived higher ed. We tend to identify much more closely with our work than other people do, right? People with different education levels, and that is neither a good thing nor a bad thing, but it just kind of is, right? And if you're someone who is identified as being this thing that is associated with what you do, and you've been doing it for a while, the identity shift associated with doing something different is really what's underlying a lot of the fears that crop up, that you're telling yourself you can't change because this is who you are. It's just a story, like it's not true, but that's where the fear comes from. And so some of that is, how are people going to relate to me? People in my life going to relate to me if all of a sudden I'm not the same person? Like, there's a fear of rejection and judgment associated with that. Again, these aren't necessarily like things that we're aware of consciously. We just kind of, we feel our fear on a gut level. It's not something that we can necessarily articulate. But that's typically the kinds of stories that I hear from people.
It's interesting when I think about career changes. I think of parlaying your experience into something else. If you're in sales for cars, maybe you can do sales and yachts, or maybe you could do. But that's not a career change. I mean, what you're talking about is maybe some radical shifts, like maybe you're a toxicologist and now you're going to be opening a coffee shop, or now you're going to become a coach, right? Like those are really big changes that happen. So, in addition to the identity, I imagine there have to be a lot of fear around not knowing that new career as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we don't like change, right? Like, we human beings are hardwired to avoid things that are unfamiliar, things that are uncertain, things that we don't have any direct experience in. We really want to stick with what we know and what we're comfortable with because it's a survival mechanism. Our ancestors lived in very different times, and the unknown and the uncertain could actually be life-threatening. And so those who were more cautious innately tended to survive long enough to pass on their genes. And, we're still stuck with that wiring nowadays, even though the world we live in is vastly different, right? Like there's a very real difference between something that scares you and something that is actually dangerous and life-threatening. Those are two very different kinds of things, but our brains don't know the difference. Fear is fear. And since our brain's only job is to keep us alive, it's going to do everything in its power to keep you the same and keep you from making any sort of changes because that's part of its job. It's not trying to get in your way, but it just is, right? And so recognizing that and learning how to navigate those uncertainties is really what's key here. Because logically, you're right. Like it's all about applying the skills that you have. You're never starting from scratch. You're always starting from some kind of experience, but that's a logical way of looking at it. And when faced with some sort of a change, even if it's a change you desire, that fear is gonna hijack things. And you have to learn how to navigate that and work with it. Otherwise, it's just gonna be, fear is gonna be driving the bus basically, and you're just gonna be a passenger.
What you and I have, in preparation for this, kind of geeked out about personal development. And one of the things that personal development talks a lot about talks about mindset, talks about manicuring or growing or developing a strong mindset, strong self-confidence, strong sense of self-worth, things like that. And so I would say, for all that I've invested in my own personal development, I still wrestle with those things. I still wrestle with those fears and those uncertainties and that self-doubt. And by no means do I think I've overcome any of it. But would you say that there's an element of that in your practice of helping people improving their self-worth, reducing self-doubt? And how does that tie into your experience with personal development or your research in personal development?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the mindset work is fundamental to everything that I do. And all of the other stuff is kind of a side effect. All of the external changes, the circumstance changes are a side effect of making the internal shifts, because we only do the things that are aligned with who we think we are and the things that we believe. And so if you want to change your external circumstances, you have to change the way you think about things. And so that's really what I focus on with people. And I learned this through my own experiences, right? Like when trying to leave a toxic job, I was rejected for what at the time seemed like my dream job. I was really, really desperate to get out of this workplace. And I finally, after multiple months and months of getting rejected, I finally got an opportunity that I thought was going to be my way out. And it was for a job that I was so excited about. And I bombed the final interview. Like I completely tanked the final interview because I was such a nervous wreck, right? And it had nothing to do with my qualifications or my background. It was everything that was up in my head. And so that was kind of what started me on this path of personal development, because as a scientist, I didn't at first know what to do with this information. I'm like, what do you mean my qualifications aren't enough? What do you mean my credentials aren't enough? Like, you just told me I'm smart enough to do this job, but I don't have something else that I don't understand how I fix, right? Like that was kind of my initial bafflement when I got that feedback. And it was devastating because I had leaned so hard on my intellect for so long that I didn't know what to do with this new piece of information. But once I discovered, the personal development rabbit hole and realized that there's so much going on that we're not even aware of, that controls how we show up in the world and the decisions we make and the opportunities that we even notice, like that's really what changed everything. And so that's why when I work with people, I really focus on doing the internal work so that the external stuff changes in alignment with who they are on the inside. Like that's really how the lasting transformation happens.
My brain tries to simplify complicated things. And one of the things that pops out is, especially if you're heavy duty left brain, maybe this is just my experience, but heavy duty left brain tend to be very introverted. They like to be very isolated. They're focused on, maybe solving whatever problems they are, less extroverted. And one of the things that's challenging is you get this group of people that are extremely bright and capable, but maybe they don't know how to present that information confidently, or they don't know how to speak up confidently despite having all of these skills. And so it's like, for me, I wanted to find the technical route of gaining confidence, because I was more on the left brain side. Like, how do I gain confidence? How can I technically add that skill? And I would say personal development was a key cornerstone of it, but I couldn't tell you that there was a book to read, right? Or a thing to do. So how do you do it? How do you take this person who has all the skills and insert that mindset?
I'm really glad that you mentioned introversion, because that is a misconception that I think keeps a lot of people stuck in patterns of thinking that aren't helpful. This is just kind of an aside, but I do want to touch on this because I hear it a lot. I hear, I'm an introvert, therefore I can't network effectively, therefore I can't make connections well. And that is simply not true. Introversion really just has to do with whether or not you find interacting with other people to be draining or energizing, right? That's it. Communication is a skill. It is not a personality trait. It is not something that is inherent that you have no control over. You can learn to be better at that. And networking is just another kind of communication. I'm an introvert, and I talk to people all day long. I created a job for myself, basically, that requires me to talk to people day in and day out in order to do what I do. And yet I'm an introvert. That just means that I manage my energy differently. That's all. Everything else is just a skill. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that, because I hear that misconception a lot, and I find it becomes a very convincing and convenient excuse that people make in order to not do the work to get better at the skill.
I think that's really valid. I think, and this is probably a mistake on my part, but the parallel is mostly with extroverts being confident communicators and confident in public situations versus introverts having less confidence in public situations. But you're saying that's not necessarily the case. It's different. Yeah.
Confidence is totally different. No, confidence has nothing to do with whether you're introverted or extroverted, because confidence is based on your experiences. Okay, so when we're trying to do something new, and this will actually get to your earlier question about how do you reprogram the mindset? Whenever you're trying to do something new and it is scary and you're hesitating because you're like, I've never done this before, it's hard to be confident because you don't actually have any evidence that you're capable of doing this. Not really, if it's something brand new, right? You're stepping into the unknown, but that's where growth happens. So confidence is actually something that you can't generate out of thin air. Confidence happens through experience. But what you can do when you're in those scary new situations is you can lean on your courage. Courage is something that everybody has access to. You summon that from yourself. And that's the thing that allows you to step into the arena if it's your first time and you've never done it. That's what allows you to walk out on that very first stage and give that very first keynote speech, or to send that very first networking request, or to send that email to someone that you want to get on their podcast, right? The courage is the thing that you really need to lean on until you've gotten the reps in, and now you have some evidence to say, no, look, I actually can do that. Look at all this evidence that I've generated of these times that I have stepped up and I was just fine. Maybe I was awkward the first time, but look, I got better the second time, right? You can see your progress. It's measurable. That's where confidence comes from. And it has nothing to do with whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert.
Now, when I'm thinking specifically, I have a good friend of mine who is probably a great client for you at this time of his life. He messaged me the other day. He said, look, my company that I've been working for, they're closing up shop. I'm going to need to find a new career. I haven't been happy with where I'm at with what I've been doing. I really want to be, and he wants to be in the entrepreneur space. He would love to be in the entrepreneurship space, but I think what is challenging for him is finding something that he can comfortably, and I think that maybe this is a key word to go with the challenge, or courage, but finding an opportunity that he can comfortably step into with his current skill sets. right? So he wants to be an entrepreneur. He hasn't done it before, but he has this desire to be there. And he doesn't know necessarily what skills he's missing. He just feels like there's definitely skills that he has and skills that he's missing, and he doesn't know if that's an okay jump for him to make. So how do you, I got to imagine that's what most people feel like. I know I've got some skills, but there's so many that I'm missing that I'm going to need to do for this. Is it irresponsible to make that jump, or is there prep work that you should be doing before making that jump, or is it just courage?
Here's the thing about skill acquisition. Okay, let's say you read a book on how to operate a motorcycle, right? How to operate a motorcycle. You read the book cover to cover. You understand the mechanics of it. You understand the steps that you would need to take to turn it on, and how to steer, and how to accelerate, decelerate, all these things. By reading that book and acquiring that knowledge, are you actually able to ride the motorcycle at that point?
No.
Right. What do you have to do to actually learn how to ride the motorcycle?
Well, ideally, you'd have somebody who knew how to ride a motorcycle talk you through it in a real life environment where you're on the motorcycle, and maybe like a mentor type of person who can tell you if you're doing something wrong or foolish along the way.
But the point is, you'd have to do it, right?
You'd have to practice absolutely. It.
And actually put it, yes, ideally under the guidance of someone who can help you with that. But, we don't necessarily need a human to teach us how to do everything. But my point is that for something that you have never done before, the only way to acquire the skill is through doing it. You can't actually study your way into a new skill. You have to put it into practice. And so worrying about all the skills that you don't have yet isn't going to help you get to where you want to be. It's more about identifying the target. And this is true whether you want to start a business or if you want to transition into a new career, or anything. It doesn't matter what it is. The thing that you want to do that you currently don't know how to do, you need to figure out where the gaps are. But in order to fill that gap, it takes action, it takes implementation, and not just consumption of knowledge. Because until you actually, try to do the thing, mess it up, learn from that, and then start to get better at it, that's the only way that you're going to acquire the skills. It's not through reading. It's not through consumption. It's not through even just listening to me talk, right? I can talk until I'm blue in the face, but until you start doing some of the things that I'm advising you to do, you're never going to actually acquire the skill. You're just getting an entertaining or enlightening, chat, right? And ultimately, that's not going to change anything.
So would you say, at the end of a session or at the end of a coaching experience with you, really the outcome is courage, the courage to step into whatever they want to try, and the courage to fail at ultimately?
Yeah, that's a big thing. And reframing failure is actually a big part of what I help people with, because fear of failure is a big one that holds people back, right? I haven't done this before, therefore what if I fail? Well, you're probably going to not get it right. Your first time doing anything is never going to be your best time, but you can't get better at it until you step in, right, and do it for the first time. And reframing failure is just a learning opportunity, is a huge mindset shift that changes the way that people show up. Because when you take the fear away from it, when you stop looking at it as this is a reflection on me, it goes from I'm a failure, which is the identity. It's when you're internalizing the failure as being a judgment on you, right, a reflection of your worth. Getting rid of that way of looking at it, and instead looking at it as either I get the outcome that I want or I learn something. Those are the only two things that can happen. And that changes everything. So at the end of a coaching experience, with me, or even with anybody, right? At the end of something like that, the transformation is really that you have become the kind of person who doesn't let their fears and their doubts hold them back. You still feel fear. You still feel the doubt. All of that's going to be present because we're human, and that's just how our brains work. But you have learned new ways of thinking about it and responding to it so that you are still in the driver's seat and you're not letting your fear and your doubt run the show anymore.
As we talk about this, I'm putting myself in the seat of a client. I'm thinking about my friend, and I got to imagine, okay, so, and I'm sure every client says this too, but I got to imagine that the fear of financial loss has got to be huge for some of these people. I mean, maybe not all of them, but it's like if I step into this, maybe it costs me money. Maybe I won't make as much. Maybe I won't be able to find another job that's going to pay me as well after I leave this. Like that fear of as a dad, got a wife and 2 kids to care for. The fear of financial loss is big for me. I'll admit, if I wanted to make a radical change, that'd be the biggest fear that I would wrestle with. Are most of your clients in that space too? And how do you talk them through that?
That fear really, I've only ever really encountered that particular fear for those who are considering starting their own business and going the entrepreneurial route. For those who are wanting to pivot, usually it's actually to make more money. A lot of times, like they're wanting to pivot out of something where they may not feel like they're making quite as much as they would like to, and are thinking about opportunities that would more financial income. But for those who are thinking about the entrepreneurial route, that's a really valid concern, right? Like, what if I don't make as much money? What if I go broke? Because you're taking away the I don't want to call it a safety net, because it's not really, because we all know there's no job security, but it's the consistency of the income that's associated with working for somebody else. Like all of those mechanisms that are necessary to generate revenue for the business so that you can get a steady paycheck. Someone else is handling that when you have a boss, right? Whereas if you choose to open up your own business, whatever kind of business it is, it's on you to do all of those things that were previously handled by some other mechanism in the company you worked for. So,
and this is an experience that you have experienced firsthand, right? Like as part of your stepping out and becoming an entrepreneur, you've had this major risk taking. So how did you justify that to yourself? How did you get yourself in a place to go full time as a coach? Tell us the whole story. Tell us the story of why you became a coach. And I always ask, because I'm always interested in what makes people grow, and not just grow from the standpoint of like, okay, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, but what are those moments in life that you say, I want my life to be different. I want my life to be better or more aligned with my vision. And I'm really interested in those moments. What are those triggers that created that? So please tell us what your journey was.
Well, I've already mentioned, briefly about how I found personal development and how I started down that journey. After I got out of that toxic job that led me to the personal development world, I was able to get out of survival mode, because when you're in survival mode, you got to do whatever you got to do to fix your situation. There's not really a lot of breathing space for, what do I want? What are my big visions? What is going to really fill my cup? You don't have space for that when you're in survival mode. It's really about just saving yourself, right? So once I got out of that situation, again, by reframing, I didn't change much about how I was doing the job search after that. It was more that the way that I approached it was different. My thinking about it was different, and consequently, how I felt about myself was very different. Therefore, I was conveying my qualifications better because I believed that I was qualified, right? And a good candidate. And I was showing up in interviews more relaxed and able to have connection and conversation, because I wasn't worried about trying to convince someone to give me a chance and prove myself. Once you take those mindsets away and you replace them with, this is about connecting with another human. Do I even just want to work with this person? Like, that kind of thing. Like once you start looking at it from a different lens, again, you just show up differently. And so that's how I got out of that situation. Once I had some breathing room, I started thinking about, what do I actually want to do? Because up until this point in my life, I had been following the path that was laid out for me. I had thought when I joined the crime lab that I was going to stay in that system and retire from it, because that was the story that I had been carrying around, from my parents. And this isn't a judgment on them. This is the story that they felt was going to be best for me, right? They were really trying to give me, some guidance on how they thought would be best for me to navigate things. It just so happens it wasn't a good fit for me. And I finally had some space to go, okay, what do I actually want to do? And that's when I started to notice that those thoughts and stories that I was having in my own head about, this is all I know how to do. What are people going to think? What if I leave? What if I can't get another job? All of maybe I should settle. That's another big one that kept going through my head. Maybe I should just find a way to settle and cope with this, because anyone else would be grateful for this kind of a job. What's wrong with me? Yeah. I can't be happy with it, right? Like all of that crap that I was thinking in my head as I was trying to get out of this job that was actually really, really bad for me. I started paying attention to the communities I was in, specifically communities of PhDs who wanted to leave academia. And I heard a lot of the same stories. And that's what got me thinking, oh, it's not just me. And I thought about the fact that I couldn't find the kind of help that I wanted when I was in the middle of it and was trying to claw my way out of it. So everything I do now is basically to shortcut, the process for someone else. I had to figure it out from trial and error. I couldn't find all of the solutions that I needed in one place. And so I had to learn about mindset and limiting beliefs and some of the psychology that's going on the surface, the neuroscience, why our brains do what they do and how we're wired the way we are. I had to learn all of that and pull it together, from different experts and figure it out on my own. And it took a long time and it took a lot of work. And I saw an opportunity to help others who were in my similar situation do it faster and get unstuck more quickly and have some guidance so they don't have to do all of the trial and error that I did. And so that's kind of how it ultimately came together. I started just by having conversations with people because the thing that scared me was what you said. If I go into business for myself, how the hell am I supposed to do that? I don't know I'm a cell biologist by training, an immunologist and cell biologist by training. I don't know anything about running a business. And so I had to learn those things because those are just different skills. Those are just skills that I didn't have. And the moment that I decided to actually become a coach, like the moment I went from, oh, I can just kind of chime in and help people and just have chit chats with people, right? To, I think I want to actually create a business around this and like turn this into my work. Happened when I was talking to a friend of mine. This happened during COVID. My friend is a personal trainer. He's a fitness trainer. And his business was completely demolished when COVID happened because he was doing nothing but in-person stuff. And he was looking at a way to transition his in-person personal fitness training online in order to maintain his business. And he was a bit overwhelmed with some of the trainings that he was finding. And so he calls me up one day. He's like, Jackie, you're a nerd. You like to learn stuff. He's like, can you watch this training on what, how to transition your fitness business online and like help me kind of break it down because I feel overwhelmed by all the info. I'm like, all right, fine. So while we're doing this, he's telling me all of these things about why he can't do it, why it's too hard. I'm afraid to be visible. I don't want to be like, it's all about organic marketing. So it was all about showing up on social media. He's like, I don't want my face up there. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. He was throwing out all of the limiting beliefs that, stop us from going after the thing we want, even though we know it would be better on the other side. And I'm coaching him, right? I caught myself. I'm like, oh, I'm kind of, if I can do this, like, if I could coach you like this now, right? And you're looking, I'm putting the pieces together. I'm like, oh, I like to coach. I like to do this. This is how you would transition an in-person business to an online thing. I could do that. Like, it's not fitness, but it's a different, mental fitness. But anyway, so that sort of like experience with my personal trainer friend is what got the wheels spinning about actually turning this into a business and devoting all of my time to it. It didn't happen overnight, but that's really how like the decision point came about. It was just one of those fortuitous, experiences that, again, because I was thinking about what I wanted my future to look like, I saw it as an opportunity. And I was willing to actually like pursue it and go down that rabbit hole. But ultimately, like the thing that changed, after that point was I had more skills I had to learn in order to learn the business side of running a business, because coaching is the thing that I want to do. I didn't go into this because I wanted to have a business, but in order to be able to coach people, I have to also have a business that is running. And so, that's one of those distinctions that I think is easy to overlook, right? Like you go into the thing because you want to do the thing, but you might have to learn how to do some other stuff that you didn't really plan on in order to facilitate that. And again, it's just skills. It's just different skills.
One of the, and again, this kind of harks back to our earlier conversation, but one of the things that stands out to me is as I explore the personal growth world and the motivation world, there was a seminal author or seminal researcher named Carol Dweck, and what she talked about was the most important thing that a person can have is the belief that they can grow. Like if you step into any situation, you're like, this is who I am today, this is who I'm going to be tomorrow, and so I shouldn't try it, then that mindset can't get you anywhere. But if you have that mindset, like, okay, I know I need to get here and I know I can do it. I know it's going to take me time. I know I'm going to need to study and acquire skills. Just that small difference is vast when it comes to the success outcomes, at least in Carol's studies that people were looking for. And it sounds like, from your perspective and your personal journey, that's exactly the mindset that you had coming into the coaching business and entrepreneurship and all of that, having to learn it.
Absolutely.
I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to, yeah. And I think we underestimate how do I say this? I've probably got 15 years of study in the personal development world, reading all the major authors and listening to the major speakers in the space, and we know all the names, but it's easy to take for granted when, at least for me, the ideas and the mindset required to get someplace. You don't realize, like you were saying, that you spent so much time on yourself, so much time to learning how the brain works, learning how thoughts come into your mind. The fact, I'm not saying this right, but I wanted to say the fact that people can come to you to get that information in a consolidated way, can learn to mature or learn to tweak their mindset in a quick way, is really, really valuable.
Thank you. Yeah. One thing that I didn't appreciate until I got more deeply into the personal development space was the power of having an external perspective, because I think a lot of these concepts are pretty easy to grasp, like intellectually, because we're all smart people. Like it's not that this doesn't make sense, but the implementation is really hard because we're talking about things that are already happening inside of our mind, and we want to believe, or we tend to believe, that what we think is true because we believe it. And at the end of the day, like, it's hard to see your thoughts for what they are, especially when you're first starting this. And so having an external perspective is really helpful. I think that the power of a coach or a mentor is that, versus like a friend, versus someone who's like, your buddy or whatever, is that they're gonna ask you questions and challenge you in a way that will help you to see the assumptions that you're making, the way that those assumptions create blind spots that ultimately keep you stuck in an unhelpful habit loop. And so a lot of what I do with my coaching clients is, and what I have experienced by being coached, because I have a coach, right? Like none of this stuff that I help people with I still struggle with it. It's not like you fix it, right? It's not like a broken finger and you heal it up and you're good. No, it's just that your ability to navigate the hurdles becomes easier with practice and repetition and with guidance. So the beauty of working with someone who is coaching you versus like just learning from a course or a book or something like that, or a podcast, is that the other human can ask you questions. They can notice things that you're oblivious to because you're so used to operating and thinking the way that you have been thinking, and they can challenge them and basically break some of those loops or interrupt them just enough to give you the opportunity to see it for what it is and choose to do something different. Or you could choose to do the same thing. But the point is that it's a choice. And the more awareness that you have, the easier it is to pause between that stimulus and the response, and give yourself the breathing room to actually like be intentional about what you do. And that's really where the power of a coaching or a mentorship relationship comes in. Because as much as the information that I put out there, the content that I share is helpful, I can't help you specifically about your thing, because there needs to be a dialogue, in order to do that, and that medium doesn't allow for it. And so that's really why working with somebody and getting some help is so crucial, because you can't read the label when you're inside the box.
Well, and the personalization side of things, right? Like that's really what you're getting at is you can read all these books, but until they are, there's 20 different diets out there, but every person responds to each diet or likes each diet based on who they are and what their experience is, and maybe body chemistry has something to do with that. And so, um, I think it's what I mean by like bringing everything together and distilling stuff is you've been able to explore the personal development and the mindset space from a broad range of perspectives and from a broad range of information sources, and also apply it across a broad range of clients, giving you kind of a unique ability to personalize the advice and the types of questions that may impact a person most. And you and I talked before, and you said, typically your engagements are what, 1 to 3 months in terms of your coaching space.
Yeah, it depends on what the person wants or needs help with at the moment. I have two ways that I work with people. The 1 month engagement is typically around clarity. So, that individual who's not sure what it is that they want to focus on, what direction they want to head in, we can work together for 30 days to really nail that down, figure out exactly what kinds of roles make the most sense to move towards. Or if you're thinking about starting your own business, we can talk through the idea, right? And kind of crystallize that. I am not a business coach, by the way. So the handful of clients I've worked with on that in particular, I have then sent off to work with someone who's an expert on the business side of things, because that's not my area of expertise. And I am not one of those egomaniacal people who are just going to, color outside their lanes, right? And what I'm saying? Like I'm very, very careful to stay in my lane and focus on what I have expertise in. And so when I do work with people about starting their own business, it's really just about getting clear about their idea so that they can take deliberate next steps, usually with someone who's more qualified to then do the business setup part of that. But anyway, either way, the point is, like, the shorter engagement is really about clarity, right? Because if you're not clear about what you're doing or what you're aiming for, you can't really plan out how to get there. You can't take the right actions because you don't know what you're aiming for. The longer term coaching engagement that I offer is really more about the implementation part. So we still start with clarity. You always start with clarity no matter what, because the more effort you put into that up front, and the more clear you are, not just about what you want, but why it's important to you. Why do you even want that thing? What's the driving force behind it? Because unless you have an emotional attachment to the thing that you're trying to get, you're going to have a hard time overcoming those obstacles. You have to have some sort of a sense of what's driving you towards that target. And then you also need to get clear about the kind of person you need to become in order to have it, because the person you are right now doesn't have that life. The person that,
Right.
the person who has the life that you want is very different from who you are right now. And so there are going to be changes that need to happen. And so getting clear about what those changes might look like, again, all of that informs the strategy that you're going to implement. And then we work on the mindset as you're taking those steps, because when you start doing the things, that's when all the gremlins show up, right? Like that's when all the fears and the limiting beliefs start showing up. And while we're aware of usually what our big deal is, our big deal objection is to things, and the way it shows up, like, for example, you might know that you're a procrastinator, right? You might know that procrastination is the one big thing that you've been battling it for years and it just can't seem to go away. And that's great. Like that awareness is wonderful, because we can keep an eye out for it and we can work on ways to mitigate that and instill new habits. But there are also others. It's never just one. And until you start doing the things, then, the ones that you didn't know about, the ones that you weren't really aware of, might start cropping up. And we can personalize how you approach, again, mitigating those negative outcomes and like reframing your beliefs and your habits so that you can continue to take consistent action to move towards your goals.
What I think is really impressive about that is, even if it's 1 month or if it's 3 months, if you take into consideration how many years people sit in situations that they're unhappy with, and it's like, I sat in a job for an entire year that I absolutely hated. And at the end of the year, I was just like, what was I doing? I wasted a whole year of my life. And I mean, there's the time, there's the loss of new growth, there's the unhappiness, there's like a litany of different things that come with this lost time. And I think it's really cool that you've created a service that can move somebody from where they are today to someplace that's a better fit for them, happier, well, financially better, whatever that is, in a fairly short period of time, without all those years. And I don't think people can understand just how important that is. It's like you go to college, right? And you hope to get a degree because when you're done with that degree, you're supposed to make more money. And that more money is going to last you a lifetime. It's like you're not just making an extra $20,000 in 1 year that's going to pay for that university or whatever, 60,000, however much your university ends up being. But you're going to make that for the rest of your life or the rest of your working career. And, in the same way, it's like if you can make that career shift, if you can make that mindset shift that enables you to step into a new career in a matter of months that's taken you years to sit on, that's time well spent, and effort well spent. So I think it's great that you've brought it all together and pulled in that. If people want to connect with you, if people want to do coaching with you, or they're interested in being coached by you, can you give us the best way to do that?
Yeah. So I have a website. It's jackiecoley.com. And there you can find more information about my philosophy about coaching and kind of what it would look like in general to have to work with me as a coach, as well as, client testimonials and things like that. That's a great source of information. I'm really active on LinkedIn. That's where I'm posting content almost every day during the week. And the posts are really designed to kind of help you take an honest look at where you're at. Sometimes it's a little bit pointed, right? It's to kind of make you just a little uncomfortable with how comfortable you've gotten with not feeling good about your life, so that you can take a look at it. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you did mention that the financial gain is definitely something that I can help with. And that's important to some of the people, particularly like academics who are trying to leave academia. People who've been in postdocs who want to get into industry. Like there's usually a big pay jump in making that transition. But more importantly, my goal is to really help you realize your full potential. I don't want you to get to the end of your life and look back and feel like you wasted all of that potential because you were too afraid to step up and go after the thing that you want to do. That you were afraid of judgment or afraid of failure or afraid of whatever it is.
Yeah.
I really feel like, if more of us actually had the courage to step into what it is that we want to do, make the impact that we want to make, and build fulfilling lives for ourselves, that's kind of how we make the world a better place, one person at a time. And so, that's really what it is that I'm trying to do with my work. And the way I do that right now is primarily through coaching. That might change as time goes on, but that's my mission, is to help more people do the work that they feel called to do so that they can make the impact that they want to make in the world. And hopefully that makes everybody's lives a little bit better by extension.
I think it's such an incredible mission, and it's a mission shared by all of us in the personal development community. But I love what you've done in this space, how pointed it is, how specific it is in terms of helping people make this career jump. And if anybody wants to connect with you on LinkedIn, feel free to, or if it's a second connection or whatever, I'm happy to make an introduction if you guys want to get connected with Jackie. But Jackie, thank you so much for talking with us and talking about mindset and career coaching. And we're very excited to see what you do with this business.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. This has been a blast.
All right. We'll catch you around.